Here we go, pulling up the live webcam. Holly Bell and Sam O'Brien here reporting from Great River School Radio Central, also known as our community Tuesday, Thursday gathering. We'll be doing this for sure for the next couple weeks at the same time, 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And if anyone who is here attending has questions, I'll just note to you, I'll share my desktop just for a moment so you can see, oh dear, that if you're looking, say at your Zoom controls, you can click on the Q&A button, and that Q&A button should pull up a place for you to type in questions. Now I see it this way because I'm a panelist, but you specifically can put your questions in there. That's the best place for questions. And so tonight, I will start out with just a little review of some information that was sent out to all families. Then I'll answer questions of folks who are here. It's always best to put your questions in the Q&A again, rather than chatting them in the chat. But Holly Bell will be here helping me make sure I answer the questions in the chat. Hi. And also just making this a little more dialogue based. So let's see, anything I forgot to say that we should say starting off, Holly?
Please put your questions in the Q&A box, or even better, raise your hand like Sam said.
Oh yeah, and you can digitally raise your hand. I see a little blue glove raises near your name, and then I can allow you to talk. And so we're using a webinar format. So first thing we'll do tonight though, I'm gonna share a view of a message that we sent out to all families on our mailing list just about 57 minutes ago. And specifically, it's our August 6th newsletter. The next one's gonna come out on the 20th. And the next one after that will probably then come, in fact, 2 weeks later. And then we're going to assess how often to send newsletters during the school year. But the big announcement today is that we will be starting our school year in distance learning. So the little graphic here, we want to remind you distance learning is learning at home. This may or may not look like your home, but we've put 5 little icons here to represent the kinds of things that distance learning can look like for you and your family, which can include digital screen interface, which is just a fancy way for what my the young people closest to me in my life say, screen time. It could look like some screen time. It also could look like engaging in written and reading material. It also could look like hands-on projects, such as tools, or here fishing is suggested. It could also look like taking adventures, though this tent isn't to imply that we're going to be tenting overnight. We will not be this fall. Specifically, we want to make sure that everyone who got this message, everyone who's coming to attend Great River School this coming fall, fills out our child care and technology survey. And we are asking you to do that by the 13th of August. That is 1 week from today. So Holly and I will be two of the folks reminding you and working with Charlie Ziki and our communications department to let you know to please fill out that survey by next Thursday. We're using that to identify who needs technology support and for supervision or childcare for their students during the day. So as I run through the message here, I just want to make sure that everybody who's on the call and maybe listening to this after it's recorded knows our updates. And so the big update here is that we're starting our school year in distance learning. Specifically, we're choosing this model both because of the public health data that we're looking at in local counties, and also because we know that the mitigation strategies that are recommended in order to make it safe, say, to attend in a hybrid model, we have to practice those mitigation strategies, and we have to instruct each other on how to do them before we show up at school in person. And so mitigation includes mask wearing, it includes social distancing, it includes how to use different entrances so we're not all packed together through the same space at the beginning and end of the time periods. It also includes simple things like how do you be an upstander in that kind of environment? How do you say what you're comfortable and not comfortable with? How do you say if you need a break or got to take off your mask, but you don't want to freak out anyone around you? So those mitigation strategies and the instruction are part of our preparedness to go back to school in a hybrid or in-person model. And so it's a combination, again, of viral activity and our preparedness for mitigation that we're using to make that decision. So if you want any reminders of what we've heard from families, we put the family feedback that we've gathered in the message that we sent to you. And then just a little reminder, like just as I was saying, the viral activity that's shown here on this graph to our preparation, mitigation, and ability to implement safety measures is really going to determine whether or not we are in distance learning, hybrid, or in-person learning through the whole year. And so as we start this year, I just want to make very clear that while we are starting distance learning, we're monitoring the case rates in our neighborhoods. And so those are county-based case rates. And because we have students that come from all 7 of the metro counties, and frankly, even a couple others, we're looking at the county case rates that are most volatile or highest in terms of case counts per 10,000 people. And in order to move from a distance learning model to a hybrid model, which is what we would do, we move from this model we're starting the year in to the next most in-person model, which is hybrid. And we do that, we would step down rather than jump from distance to in-person. So in order to move to a hybrid model, I just want to make very clear that we need to see case rates show a pattern of decline over multiple weeks. And so we'll be monitoring that. But to start out the year, I want to also make clear that when we say we're starting the year with distance learning, we'll be monitoring cases through August, but we're confident that we're going to do it for the first several weeks of the year. And so we know that there's no substitute for personal contact and the kind of relationship building and learning that happens in person. But specifically, we've used the state guidance to make our plan. And in this distance learning model this fall, we do anticipate that small groups of students, not likely whole classrooms, but small parts of classrooms or adolescent advisories or small learning cohorts could meet in person at parks or on campus outdoors using mitigation strategies that we've already talked about and practiced. And so, you know, as we design those with our educating staff, our guides and licensed staff over August, we'll get to you with the details for sure by the time school starts, but we wouldn't be doing that right away. We'd begin working toward that. And so I want to just emphasize the state of Minnesota gave us some guidance last week to, 1, use the data, use the epidemiology that we're getting, 2, make a local decision about our preparedness, and then to constantly reevaluate. And so I'm going to let you know that we get updated health data every Thursday, and we're going to look at that data and then be ready by the following Monday to talk you know, to our community in general about what we're thinking, but it'll be then the following Thursday that we communicate any changes to your family about what the model we're using is. And as it comes down here, this is the picture we want to give you about reevaluating the learning model. We will not be generally, I anticipate, making week-to-week decisions. So in terms of you planning on learning as a student or you planning on your learning as a family and supporting your student, when we say distance learning, I'm fairly confident right now in telling you that we're distance learning at least for the first 6 weeks of school. And specifically why I say that is because I know we need the first few weeks in order to learn those mitigation strategies together. I know that our educators are going to design the most effective programs that they can. And in order to do that, they need to be able to rely on how we're going to meet together. And then I also know that with the holiday coming up in September, the first week in September, and then the amount of travel that happens between counties, that as we move into the fall, we're looking for case rates in counties over time to either stabilize or show us a pattern that's reliable. And so if we were going to move to another model, we're going to give you at least 2 weeks notice if we're going to go from, say, a hybrid model down to a more in-person model of in-person, or to move from, say, a distance learning model down to hybrid. At least 2 weeks notice to be less conservative about our mitigation. If we say we're in a hybrid model, though, and we had a case count that rose quickly in our community, or we saw something from the Department of Health that told us to pull back, we could go from an in-person or a hybrid model pulled back to a distance learning model in a 1-day notice. So just to let you know, as a family, when we say distance learning to start the year, we're generally talking about that first part of the year up through what we say here is October 19th. I anticipate we would be committing to that model through then, and then letting you all know somewhere around October 5th what we anticipate doing for that next period of time. And what we're trying to do as we give you these intervals of time is give you predictable times when you can know we're going to be evaluating data rather than thinking week to week we're going to be jumping between models. And then so again, just care and supervision at school. Another reason that we're really focusing on starting the model year with distance learning is so that school campus can be a resource center. Specifically, we know that essential workers, both tier 1 and tier 2 essential workers, need childcare through the day. And then we also know that a variety of circumstances in your family might mean that you may not officially qualify as a tier 1 or 2 essential worker, but that you might also need childcare. And in our community, in this model right now, and with the state guidance, we can provide that care. And so if your family is a tier 1 or 2 essential worker, if your family qualifies for free and reduced lunch, or if your family is in another circumstance in which you need care and supervision at school, we've given some basics here so that you know that from 9 to 2, we are ready to provide that care in any of our models to any students who come. And if we are inundated with too many students who need to be on campus and we can't mitigate effectively, then we will have to pull back just to families who qualify for free and reduced lunch and or are essential workers in tier 1 or tier 2. We put here again just an overview of what the monthly fees will be for childcare, and that's just for before or after care. We'll give more details about childcare, how to sign up on a sliding scale in future weeks, and for sure by August 20th. But we just wanted to make sure that you understood that. And then we have a technology and childcare survey that I highlighted at the top, and we really want that filled out again by August 13th. And then we'll be doing these forums again every Tuesday and Thursday. The highlight of what we announced today, of course, there's always Heron to Go to plan for. Heron to Go is the situation where our nutrition program in our kitchen makes delicious food, either freezes it, cans it, or preserves it, and then you pick it up to heat it at home or eat it. Here we've highlighted our pickle. You can count on that happening again through September and through the school year. The pickup day will change to Wednesdays, and we'll get in touch with you with more details about that again on August 20th at our next newsletter date. And of course, no picture of our nutrition program would be sufficient until we showed a giant vat of something delicious being poured over a giant vat of something else. And so some other community updates, we still have a community mask making campaign going on, and then we've put links to local and regional and neighborhood resources for supporting each other in this ongoing pandemic. And so I suppose having gone through that, you should go back and read it. You should check the email for it. It came at about 5:08 p.m. And that's a summary, that's a walkthrough. So if you're podcasting, you just heard basically all the info we released today. And now what we're going to switch to is questions. I'll stop the screen share for now. And we've got a couple questions in the Q&A. Holly, anything that I missed or we should cover?
No, we're good, except I would like to tell the participants that there are, you had said this, but I want to remind people that there are recordings of previous meetings like this where other questions have come up that they should probably go back and listen to for more information.
Absolutely, yes. And I'll pull up our website just so people can see where to find that as we warm up this first question. Holly, can you rev up the question engine?
Yes. Emily Schilling is a new parent of a prospective student coming in. Her question is, what kind of technology do high school students need? Laptops, iPads?
Oh, great. Thank you for asking, Emily. And students who are coming in to the school year, one, you can choose to use any device you have at home. It would be helpful for your student to have a device that can support this kind of video interaction. So a laptop or a tablet will work. You want a student, especially though in the adolescent level, in the high school level, 9th through 12th year, to have a keypad attached to that so they can do word processing and type. However, if you're transferring in as an adolescent student, you should also know that handwritten methods are emphasized, both because that's actually used in the IB program. Like much later as a senior, you'd take IB exams written still. And you just recognize and cognate information differently when you have handwritten it. So it's not going to be, even though we're distance learning, it won't be only typing and interfacing that way. So an iPad would work, a Chromebook would work, you know, a higher grade laptop would work. Also, however, every family should be planning this fall that every student in their household should have their own device. And so we have a lot of families in the spring who didn't ask us for a device because they say had 1 or 2 devices between 2 or 3 students. We want to make sure, though, that students are not, say, held or have a barrier from communicating with their guides or coordinating their schedule. And so if you're a family, you want to fill out that technology survey that I mentioned before the 13th, and you want to let us know that you need a device if you don't have one per student. So we're a public school. We are prepared to provide a device to you, to lend it, and you can return it to us when we're not using it anymore at home. And I just want to emphasize that nobody has to be going out to purchase new things in order to participate in the distance learning program here this year. And so if you got other questions that are specific though to technology needs, I suppose I want to mention here that devices, you need a device, but you also need an internet connection. And my understanding is that even the slower internet connections of say 600 kilobytes per second, you would struggle if any student is doing more than just their one Zoom call on that. So you can't say have a Zoom call and be working on a document at the same time, and you can't have two students on that. So if you think that your internet speed is challenged, then you should also just let us know you have a question about that, because what we'll be doing is spending the next month of time really working with you to make sure that you have the resources we need. For all the podcast listeners, this is an additional answer, not to that first question from Emily Schilling, but as you're entering the year thinking, why is Great River starting in distance learning? I'll just reemphasize, we anticipate that regardless of how we begin the year, we do anticipate that at some point we'll have to do distance learning again, and we really wanted to make sure that every family is prepared to do that successfully and really without the kind of abrupt transition that we had in the spring. And so we're packing for a trip, and we want to make sure we got everything. And so starting in distance learning in many ways is like what I used to do long ago with students who were going on the Odyssey. Is for brave students, we would take their bags, put them in the shower at school, and turn them on to make sure they were waterproof. We got to make sure we're prepared. We got to make sure we're watertight. And so that's how we're going to start. So we want to work with you this next month to make sure we're watertight and distance learning too. All right, next question. What do you think, Holly?
We have one in the chat from Amy. How is the IB program going to be impacted by distance learning scenario?
Oh, great. Amy, thank you for asking. I won't go too far into this because we do still have a volunteer program in which both staff who have volunteered and then community members who have volunteered are working together to finalize both the student schedule and the academic program. Right now, the drafts and the proposals that I see show that instead of a typical school year where a typical student would say have 6 courses at a time, you'd have 2 electives, and then you'd have math, science, social studies, and literature. Those 6 courses would still be delivered in the IB program, but this year in the proposal that I'm seeing, 3 courses at a time would be taken by students. And then after a certain period of time, likely 4 to 6 weeks, you would switch to the other 3 courses. And so we're looking at strategies to group those courses together in a meaningful way so that students can really go deeper into a smaller number of responsibilities to go with a greater depth of learning. And then after a certain period of time and finishing a certain number of projects or culminating events for learning, you would pause those courses and move to your other 3 courses for a certain period of time. And so that will be different in terms of IB instruction. However, what we're actually seeing is that's going to give likely more instructional hours over the course of a whole year to a student in a particular discipline. And so as the IB program, though, is delivered to our 11th and 12th year students using our Montessori methods, independent work, clear responsibilities and deadlines, really independence being used to meet accountable deadlines, those are all going to stay the same. And then what we're learning from last spring is that some more structured time, some easier ways to reach out to guides, and then looking at ways of, like I said, looking at ways of getting students more deeply involved in completion of projects rather than skipping between 6 different subjects in the same day or even the same week. So that's one way. And we're looking at reflecting those same patterns likely down into the 10th years and 9th years. And the proposal that I'm seeing about even 7th and 8th year programs is, again, pulling back on the number of different responsibilities so that students can really focus on completing accountably their responsibilities. So we'll be in touch with more details about that and specific student schedules and such as we get closer to the year and as volunteer groups finalize their decisions too. What do we got next, Helen?
Michael asks, as a parent of a 4th year, how will guides be building rapport and a sense of community to these new classroom members?
Thank you for asking, Michael. So specifically around rising students who are coming into new classroom communities, I do see a pattern of similar strategies being used, and they will be augmented to be age appropriate. But specifically community building activities that might be smaller than classroom size groups, and that could happen, say, online through online discussion and games, or teaming students up to do meaningful work that they would do at home, but then come back and say, show each other, you know, a scavenger hunt they found at home, or they would still have to construct work with their classmates. And so looking at how to design that so that, say, rising fourth years, and then students who are mentors in that classroom in fifth year or sixth year in an upper L room would build relationships early. And then also in a distance learning scenario, this is one of those places where we're looking at how we can plan for either on campus or likely near campus, or where it makes sense, using outdoor spaces that are structured learning environments that could be Como Woodlands, could be the park, could be Griggs or Horton Park, could be our campus, to bring small groups of students, even in the same classroom, to the same site, physically distanced, but without so many other students on campus from the other age levels of classrooms, having some freedom, you know, to see the classroom, to still get to see each other, and build community that way. And so we're going to focus especially on students, and Emily Schilling, this might apply to you and your student too, really to students who are new either to their environment or to the school in general, really focusing and giving those students opportunities to build a connection there to the physical site, to each other.
Hey, Sam.
All right. Yeah.
Lori sent in a message on the chat saying, speaking of trips, any ideas
Yeah.
how to fill the gap this year? So sad my senior was this ultimate key experience.
Oh, yes. So a couple things on trips. One, we are holding tight on the ability to implement a trip later this year. And so, you know, I don't want to promise, and frankly, I don't want to be unreliable in being optimistic about the future, because, you know, in April, I think folks were talking about the pandemic like when we're finally through it in the spring. And I guess I would say, Lori and Lori and your student, who I don't know if I have permission to share everyone's names here. I think about that too. And specifically what I'm thinking about is we want to be prepared for especially senior students, to have some ownership over how they want to implement a key experience like experience. And so I can imagine that the seniors are probably going to have the best, most creative, and most secure ways to comply with safety measures. And so we'll work with seniors through the year to envision that. And we'll prioritize, I'm guessing, the kinds of culminating experiences that, say, seniors have in their last year, or, you know, especially for, say, eighth years who have not had a bike trip, we would really focus on that kind of culminating experience, having a similar experience. So we're reserving both the budget and the logistical reservation ability to still have a culminating experience this year. And if we can, we will in the spring. And if we see health rates and infection rates decline and case counts decline, we will also then use those. However, if we are not able to do those same trips, I know that Melanie Peterson-Nafziger, as the Upper Adolescent Program Director coming into this year, and all of the staff working in the Upper Adolescent Program are also considering ways that we can engage in the kinds of outcomes that those key experiences produced, which, you know, are close relationships, often challenging situations with people you are not familiar with. And again, in the older grades, especially 11th year and 12th year, you know, working with your peers that you may have known for a long time, or at least that you know you're entering a transition phase in life with, and really building conversational fluency with them about what life looks like after you're done with school. And so in particular, I think this connects with something I said a couple meetings ago. Seniors and juniors, and frankly, sophomores and freshmen and eighth years and seventh years and sixth years, there's a lot of pressure on adolescents to do a certain thing at a certain time, and then therefore be ready for the next step. And I hear a lot of adults right now, I think, not understanding the consequences of their language, talking about this being a lost time, or perhaps, you know, you're an athlete and the season that you didn't get to play will never come back. there is a deficit mindset to that language, and I don't for a minute want to talk about the absence of what we expected like it's not something to grieve. And so it's a time full of sorrow if you were really looking forward to something like the fall canoe trip as a senior, and it's something to be heartbroken about. And I think what I might identify is that the practice of heartbreak is something as a teenager you often don't get to practice in a group. And that before this pandemic, I often would see the practice of heartbreak as a teenager happen because of an individual sorrow or an individual disappointment. And to be honest, we're living in a world and facing a future in which the practice of group heartbreak and expressing sorrow in a way that we take responsibility for how to act in a way that is appropriate to the time is going to be needed, you know, not just now in the pandemic, but 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And seniors, you know, you're about 7 years older than my oldest child. And so they're going to be looking to you soon, both as an adult and then soon as a peer. And I suppose I just want to try to burden you for a moment with the idea that you may be missing a canoe trip. And I'm really sad about that. And I'm also going to say it's not the first thing that you and I, if we keep in touch, will talk about is changing in the world. And so I do think that we're living through a time that is going to historically be seen as a way that we either prepared for what we are living in 10 years from now, or we talked about what we lost, and in our mania to try to get it back, we, you know, didn't take the heeded warnings we should have. And so in this case, I might be going deeper than you're asking about. Like, I'm sad about the canoe trip too. I went on the first canoe trip with seniors, and I was looking forward to try to do it again this fall, even not as a head of school. So what I would like to say is that in the spring, if we can do it, we will. But there's a deeper thing in which I want the seniors to be able to lament and heartbreak about not having gone in a way that's a little deeper than I didn't get the thing I should have gotten. Because I don't know, frankly, that seniors after you will get to go on the same canoe trip in 2021 or 2022 either. And your work now could teach them how to handle this in a way that is maybe fruitful, that something comes from it rather than just a grievance about what I didn't get, but someone 2 years ago did. So there you go. Okay, I went a little too deep. We're going to try our best to do what we can. Okay, next question. Sam, what do we got?
We're halfway through, and we have 9 questions right now. Christina
I'm going to slow. Yeah.
Christina asks, what device would be good for a first grader? An iPad or a laptop, or do you provide one, or can we get written paper for the first graders?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you asked, Christina. So for a first-year student especially, we are going to emphasize a lot of work with the hands, even in distance learning. A tablet would be sufficient. There won't be a lot of word processing to do for first year, if any at all. And so primarily what you will be doing is either meeting with a guide video face to video face, or you'll be possibly watching content or presentations from a guide for first year student. Please let us know if you do need a Chromebook, and that's what we would provide you. And then what we're really talking about in terms of first year digital literacy is likely just making sure that you have one password to log into one classroom site and use that way to communicate with your teacher. And so not a lot of different places to go, and not a high capacity need. So basically any device, I would say a smartphone would not be great just because it's so small. So any device that gets the human size face a little more human size would be good. I see Sally has a question about screen breaks.
Yes.
Sally says, I'm certified and connected to a few platforms. How can I best support students and staff? Who should I speak with? I think, Sally, if you have resources about ways that we can interact better with digital literacy, contacting me as head of school, you can use my personal email, or you can use the office@greatriverschool.org email. That comes to both me and actually Holly and our administration director, Stacy Krieger. And the resources that you might have about screen breaks, I will connect you likely with either our social workers or our student services department and Dean of Students, Matt McElrath. And I would really like to see those come up, you know, both through maybe parent education and then in the tools we use with students too. All right, Holly, will you ask Nick's question for us?
Yes, I will. For the students who are in care from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., will they be distance learning during that time? Or will they have
Yes.
to do that separately?
No, they won't have to do it separately. 9 to 2 will be distance learning time for students who are also supervised by our staff at Great River School. And specifically, we really want you to fill out that survey with as much information about what you think you need from us as possible. Excuse me. And what we'd really like to hear from you is that you need childcare if you think you need it at all, so that we can start to drill down into specifics. But 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. is distance learning time for students on campus too. And likely that's going to look like some distance learning with some screens, and then some distance learning by taking a break and going outside and doing some meaningful work. And it's a good time for me just to remind folks that this year, even in a distance learning scenario, we are looking for you as a family to work with your student for ages 6 to 12 or years 1st through 6th grade to identify meaningful work that they can do for about 45 minutes a day. And that could be reading habits, practicing handwriting habits, practicing taking responsibility for an animal or a area of the house or an area of the garden or a plant or several plants. It could also then look, say, like following up on follow-up work that you didn't get in between that 9 o'clock and 2 o'clock time. We want you to average 45 minutes a day. And specifically, that's if we even go to a hybrid model, the same thing. So we want you to build that pattern into your student's day at home. And so if you're distance learning from school and then staying for aftercare too, we'd be doing some care around the environment too, either with the animals on site or with the plants outside and inside, or even with the environment inside in a really safe way. And then secondly, for students aged 12 to 18 or 7th through 12th year, we want you to be averaging 75 minutes a day of meaningful work, which is probably a little bit more academic work follow-up, reading or writing or follow-up work from assignments and responsibilities. And then also caring for people and things. So that could be younger siblings, or that could just be taking on, you know, the kind of care and chores around the house that's meaningful to keeping your family going at this time. All right, next, Holly.
Sam, Mary Sage is also a new incoming parent with a question. What recommendation for a new 5th year to connect in with others? Thank you.
Oh yeah, so thank you, Mary Sage. And what I've said earlier is what's going to be part of our planning. So both connecting your student in a structured way in their classroom environment with other students in their community through the work we're doing in the first few weeks of distance learning. Also, though, when we meet outside of school in small groups, we'll be focusing on relationship building. And here's where I will plug the parent engagement group. So caregivers and guardians and parents all gather together, and I'll be talking with folks. I know a couple members of the parent engagement group leadership. You'll see them referred to as PEG or PEG. A couple of those folks are in this group tonight. I'll be working with them over the next few weeks now that we know we're starting in distance learning, to talk about effective ways to both engage new families, build community with existing families, and then recruit volunteerism. And what I can imagine is happening in maybe some of their heads right now, but we're going to try to help provide some information, is that we have a map that the parent engagement group has put together in the past. It's a digital map that shows a little pinpoint where every family lives. And those families can identify if they're up, say, for physically distant small gatherings, for study groups, or for potting together. So we're looking for the parent community to really engage with each other and build those communities where they are. And so in addition to what we're doing on campus, I would say to look for those opportunities. And you know, don't pause to become a leader and even put out in one of the social media networks that you'd like to start building community that way too in your neighborhood. That'll be useful. And so just to reiterate though, we are taking into account that there are both new students, new to Great River School, and students moving up from 3rd year to 4th year, new to those classroom communities. And so I just want to also emphasize that your student is not alone. Lots of students are feeling a little reticent about that, and you know, mine included. So who's next? What do we got?
Christina is back with a question. How is my first to do work more handwritten than or
I see. Yeah. How? Yeah. Handwritten or technology based. Yeah. So I'll just give us a little visual. So in terms of 1st through 3rd years, it would look like this. Whoop. All handwritten. That's our goal. It's almost all handwritten. We got to be working with our hands, especially ages 6 to 9, to manipulate the environment, and the environment is not necessarily the digital environment. So we want to be working way more with cardboard and pens and pencils and materials and things that squish and move and are physically taking up volume. And then in ages 9 to 12 or in upper elementary, it would look a little bit more like this. Maybe I'll use this a little bit, and then I'll use this a lot, handwritten paper. And then as you move into, say, 7th through 12th grade, it would be more like halvesies a little bit. But as a first-year student, really trying to get engaged and interested in working with your hands. And then I would recommend, especially, and we'll talk about this more, but for lower elementary students, and then frankly, again, those of you who may be, say, ages 11 to 15, you have some of the same needs that a lower elementary student has. You want to be working with your hands at regular intervals rather than expecting that your long work period is going to be, say, all writing or all reading. And so, especially for first years who are just coming into the world of reading or just working on becoming readers, handwriting and working with your hands and recognizing and cognating those shapes is a really important part of that skill development. And so really reaching out to your guide too to talk about what kind of pattern you can have at home. And so, you know, maybe in a future episode, we'll talk a little bit more about how to help as a parent accountability at home without feeling like you are sort of a bad supervisor. All right, next question, what do we got?
Ann Ingram's question is very similar. As a parent of a rising first grader, how much time per day do you anticipate first graders will be on the computer?
Yeah, so you'll get many more specifics about this from your lower elementary team. And I just want to give the caveat that our design teams are finalizing projects and curriculum over the next 2.5 weeks. So, Anne, knowing what I know as a former Children's House assistant and person who has worked with first through third graders, our goal in first year is that that student would be hands-on and manipulating materials for, say, 85% of their time, and would be either listening to their teacher talk or listening to something for maybe another 5 or 10% of their time, and that any kind of screen watching they're doing is about seeing the people in their community and participating in something active. And so some lessons will be delivered by seeing a video lesson, but really we want to be emphasizing that there won't be a whole lot of time that first year is on the computer. And so there could be, now I'll say that with a caveat that there could be, say, an app that you're using at home that's really engaging and meets some learning outcomes. There could be, you know, your first grader may have a really healthy relationship with screens and still may use them a couple hours a day before over school. That is, you know, frankly, something I don't want to get into a values debate about, especially after these past 4 or 5 months of all of us learning how to parent in a world of sometimes cabin fever. And so there's a lot to be pulled out of your question, Ann Ingram, but as a parent of a rising first grader, I would say that not a whole lot of time would be spent every day on the computer. Specifically, up to 20 or 30 minutes, I could imagine, would be an average. And that would be including the check-in, say a checkout, and maybe watching a lesson. But then that means families, you're really going to want to practice, and you could start now, habits of what is a first-year student responsible for at home? What do they organize every day? What do they clean every day? What kind of habits of getting up and writing do they have every day? Do they have a journal where they at least draw or take notes? And when I say draw or take notes, I really mean they could draw pictures of their task list, or they could write words they know of a task list, or they could be learning to draw pictures that are representative, right? So using handwork, especially now, even for a 6-year-old who's coming into first grade, would be totally appropriate to just begin in August to get in the habit of doing that kind of thing so that it's easier for you to hit that structure on September 8th. All right. I think we've gotten through 5 questions in the last 10 minutes, Holly. I think I've picked up the pace.
Okay.
Yeah. I know. After that sort of lilting song about sorrow for 18-year-olds, me and the seniors, we'll have a meeting, seniors.
Perfect.
It'll be better. Yeah.
That's perfect. So Mira asks, is there anything specific? Oh, I lost it. Ninth grade parents should be aware of. Will there be any transitional orientations for students or parents?
Yes. And so all parents, I would anticipate that we'll have transitional informational sessions, likely delivered again by Zoom and or recorded video. And we're working on a production quality to make, my home studio here is simplistic. So working on production quality, but I would anticipate we will have orientation videos for you that week of September. Excuse me on the dates now. So the 8th is a Tuesday. So say August 31st through September 4th, we'd be looking at that week to have orientation evenings and webinars like this that likely involve more experts than just me to orient you to what the school year would be like specifically. And I know that might seem late, but that's the week before school starts, and typically that's when we do have info sessions for you to come see. And then I would anticipate that we're going to do our best to give you very concrete guidance about the kinds of habits that would work best at each age group. And so I'll just say for 9th years, you two, from the current proposals I see, you also will have fewer than 6 classes at a time, but you'll go deeper into your classes. So longer periods of time for the 3 responsible classes that you have for 4 to 6 weeks, and then switching to a different 3 classes. And you'll go back and forth between those projects. And then for 9th years, I guess I would say it would be to your advantage to right now start keeping a daily journal, start handwriting again if you haven't been, and start thinking about the way that you're going to enter what our society calls high school is different than any other 9th year has in living memory. And so as you do enter, I guess I would challenge you to enter this distance learning period this fall with an open mind, which is probably going to take some work, and then also specifically be ready to really meaningfully engage. And I think you might build better habits than most 9th years have over the past dozens and dozens and dozens of years of traditional high school entry as a 9th year. So as you enter with distance learning, what I'm trying to say is don't chalk it up to a inferior learning method and somehow you're also losing something as a 9th year student. Bring everything you can to engaging with it meaningfully, and I think you're going to have more freedoms than most 9th years have had to make your work worthwhile. So
Michael wants to know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
When should we expect to hear about classroom placement?
Michael, very, very, very soon. In fact, tomorrow morning I'm going to check on that and see when we're ready, because I know that drafts have been passed around and reviewed, and so extremely soon, Michael, and this might seem a little oblique to other people, but I think, Michael, we have met your request in classroom placement as a family, just for you and your family. For everyone else, I still think we've met your needs too, but in specific, you should be hearing about that very soon if you have not already, so I'll check on that right away tomorrow morning. We got one from Peggy Larkin. Here we go.
Yes.
Yep.
You want me to read it?
I'll read this one. Oh, I got this one. Here we go. So Peggy says, yeah, you've noted in the plan, Great River School will be providing childcare for children of essential workers and free and reduced lunch recipients to try and create some equity. What about adolescents? What would that look like? Although they don't need childcare or necessarily supervision, depends who you ask. Sometimes they say they need supervision. Some need a school day to engage. What about them? So Peggy, I will, I'm removing the glasses. I will say specifically that in my vision, adolescent students who would benefit from being on site at school, my aspiration is that we can work so that the school is a resource center where they can come. I know that's a fairly complex situation because if every high schooler wanted to come, we couldn't accommodate that. But we're starting out, our case counts in terms of where we're at right now, and I think that's how I'll close this hour. In about 15 minutes after answering the rest of the questions. Our case counts right now would say strictly that we couldn't go anything beyond a hybrid model for students. And so if more than half our students want to come to school, I know we couldn't accommodate that. And so what I can say right now to the community though is that if your adolescent student needs to be on site at school for school to be productive learning for them, let us know that right now. Let us know that in the survey. And care and supervision is intended specifically for elementary age students, ages 6 to 12, is not overtly intended for 7th through 12th grade students. However, some 7th and 8th years were part of our before and after care program these past few years. And so you can still engage at that age with that Voyagers type group. That's what we called it. But even a 9th through 12th grade student, if you have to come in, let us know now, and I'm going to do our best to make that work for you. So whether that's making sure you connect with your advisor or making sure that you have you know, a supervisor in a room in a space that's physically distanced from others and safe to work in, we're going to do our best to make that work for you. Again, if we have too many people who need to come in, we'll have to space it out in a schedule, and we'll have to really keep in mind that providing essential worker care, and it's true, it's an equity issue. So families who qualify for free and reduced lunch, but it's also an equity issue in that I see that, you know, about a quarter of our families need somewhere for their kids to go every day. And so making sure that that is available is what we want to do. So let us know if that's you, and Peggy, let us know if that's you and your student, and we're going to do our best to make that work. Julie Brown-Miko says, will there be school pictures sometime this fall? Julie, we are working on that, looking at a possible likely plan of outdoor pictures and how on earth to make that schedule work. And so we'll be in touch later this month about that. Deb, will there be any live lessons given by guides to groups on Zoom or similar platform instead of pre-recorded? Yes, Deb. In fact, it's no small feat to pre-record a lesson. It's often, in fact, easier to transition from a live instructor to be a live Zoom instructor and record that. So I would expect to see live. I would also expect that in terms of best practices, when we can, we want to pre-record information, and then we want to use these kind of times for active interaction. So let's see, which one do you want to read next?
I want to read Becca's. My daughter will be starting 1st grade this year. Will there be an opportunity for her to meet her guide in person in a safe way before the year starts?
Thank you for asking that overtly, Becca. I can't guarantee that that will happen before September 8th, but one of the priorities I know will come up is that especially for new students to the school, including all of our first years, a physical experience with their new guide is going to be extremely important to build trust. And so it is one of our priorities to make sure that that happens very soon. If possible, we will be doing it before September 8th. However, it may not be possible to do it before September 8th, in which case we'd be looking to establish that kind of meeting physically safe, likely outside, and possibly even in smaller groups than the whole first year group together. But with all those caveats, yes, and my guess would be for sure happening soonish, but not necessarily before September 8th. It could be in the first few weeks of September just because there's a lot of details to work out this fall. Laura Capistrant says, and then you can get the next one from Chloe. During distance learning, will after-school activities, clubs, sports be on pause? So Laura, during distance learning, there are in fact some sports that will be carrying on. The State High School League just made an announcement that, for instance, soccer and cross-country running, I believe, will be happening. While indoor sports like volleyball and or tackle football will not be happening. So if you're a varsity athlete, you likely already know about your sport, but some sports are happening. And then what we're working on for our August 20th communication is a real specific list of how to get engaged in all the different kinds of activities. So our athletic director, Victor Vondersek, and our high school athletics information is available on our website right now. But specifically, other after-school activities and clubs and sports will actually be happening. And that's one of the things we can make sure definitely happens because we're starting in distance learning. We have the capacity to make sure that those are set up to work well also. And so while they are going to start happening, likely clubs especially will start by happening with these kinds of meetings. And then if and when possible, they'll move to outdoor physically distanced meetings with a number of participants that make sense. So likely limited numbers. What does Chloe have to ask?
For those of you who don't know, Chloe is a wonderful student. Coming back from another year, Chloe, I miss you. Will upper adolescents be in Zoom classes from 9 to 2 every day? Will independent work time be built in?
So Chloe, again, 9 to 2 is definitely the time, say, for a hybrid or in-person model this coming year. And with distance learning, I just want to give our design groups some flexibility and freedom as they decide what's going to work best. But generally, even in a hybrid or in-person model, if you're a student, I would think about your 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock as really being probably taken up not by independent work, but likely by direct instruction and or group work. And so in a distance learning format, however, there'll be a number of asynchronous or not done at the same time responsibilities. And so effectively that will be independent work. There may be courses for an upper adolescent student specifically, or when I say upper adolescent for everyone watching, that means 10th through 12th grade. Especially for 11th and 12th years, there could be, say, a TOK course or another course that happens, say, right at 2 o'clock and adds basically a fourth block to the day. That's in just one of the proposals I've seen. There are other proposals in which there are 4 blocks. And so just looking at all of that, I know we just have a couple minutes left, but don't get your heart set on the same routine as you had before. And at the same time, we'll have way more details available, I'm sure, on the 15th and that following week. So if you got specific ones, though, please send them to Melanie and possibly include me, and we'll make sure we incorporate those into what we design and answer. Tom, last question.
Wait, for our new families, what is POK? You just said POK.
Oh, TOK. Yeah, TOK is Theory of Knowledge. It's a philosophy course and an epistemology course. So thinking about my thinking and how I know what I know.
Okay, thank you. Tom says, sorry if this was previously asked, any chance for some outdoor smaller group learning, socializing while the weather is nice?
Absolutely, yes, Tom. And in fact, more likely to happen because we're starting in distance learning as a model. And so I'll use our last 5 minutes just to remind folks what we talked about in case you came in a little late and give a summary. But yes, we are going to plan some of those gatherings. And my hope would be that as we start to structure and plan those, that we can establish really community safe and respectful ways to be physically distanced and still doing stuff together in the same location, likely at parks. And when the weather is nice is true, that'll be the easiest in terms of clothing on and off. But I just think we should all be honest with each other too, that say as cold and flu season comes and it gets colder, we are likely in our society to be experiencing times in which we will have to mitigate by being even more restrictive socially than people have been this summer coming in the winter. And if we are well prepared as a community at practicing those mitigation strategies, like staying away from each other and speaking up and knowing how to safely remove your mask and not endanger other people, if we can do those things, then we can actually keep meeting even after the snow flies, physically distanced places. And so my sincere desire is to see public health data tell us that we can go hybrid and then eventually in person, and we can start doing things that we know how to do well. And then until then, let's take the things we know how to do well and let's find out ways that we can do them in a mitigated way. So Mary Sage says, are we still talking about a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday as a schedule? So yes, Mary Sage, and that is a great segue for me to share my screen. And I think that's our last official question. And what I'm going to do is actually just I'll share my screen. I'm going to go through a few details. And Holly, tell me, am I still screen sharing?
You are.
Oh, excellent. Good, good, good. So I want to remind everyone about this website. This is greatriverschool.org/return. And when you go there, you will see our head of school message from July 23rd. This will be updated very soon with our message we sent. And these scenarios, I just want to say, are still reliable. And what we are starting the school in is scenario 3, or our distance learning model. And then if things go really public health wise, we would move 3 over to scenario 2, or our hybrid school model. And then your student would be at school 2 days a week, depending on the group they're in. And if things go really, really well, and case counts are very low and stable or declining in all the counties that we serve, that's when we would move to a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in-person schedule. And the reason we'd still be Wednesdays distance learning is because we know that there's a fair number of both faculty and staff and families and students who need to stay home all year because of the pandemic. And so, yes, even our most in-person model is at home on Wednesdays. And as I'm looking at that and looking at other districts, this is one that day of the week could change And as we finalize this schedule toward the end of this month and let you all know, the only reason that would change is if we heard from a preponderance of families or really analyzed and figured out that aligning that day with another school district makes the most sense. In any case, however, I suppose while this table also still applies, that we're in distance learning to start the school year, and so your family quarantining at home is well served. If you're a family who's going to follow recommendations, you are distance learning. And again, down here, if you're an essential worker, your family qualifies for FRL, and or if you need childcare in order to keep employment or stable household, or even you might be in a situation where your student has a specific learning plan in which you know they need to be at school regularly, then we're going to do our best to even work with you to make sure that you have care and supervision on campus, even in a distance learning model. And so one thing that I just want to share also though with folks is that, and is that still showing there, Holly? I hope
yes, it is. Yep.
Great. The data that, oh, and it's all snoozed up. The data that we're using to make these decisions will stay the same for the year. And this last closing point, I just want to make very clear. This is a table you can see linked through today's message. It's the department or the talking points that we linked in today's message. And then I'm also going to make sure that this page is linked on our return page. But this basically gives a summary of our survey results from June and July, and then identifies a link to MDE's Safe Learning Plan. Specifically, it talks about the math being used, the formula being used in order to figure out what these case counts are. We tell you what the state says you have to qualify for in order to fit a certain learning model. And so we're starting in distance learning, though our numbers are between 20 and 29. Now, the learning model that we could do, the most in person we could possibly do, according to this chart, is hybrid learning for everyone. The reason we're not is because we want to make sure that our mitigation strategies are strong enough to be able to do a learning model that is less restrictive, still safe. And so I just want to give you the update that I'll be giving you basically every week is this table will change. And what I'm going to be showing you, this table, for those of you doing the dishes and listening as a podcast, on the left-hand side shows all 7 metro area counties from top to bottom. So Ramsey, Hennepin, Anoka, Carver, Dakota, Scott, and Washington. And then the columns to the right show a column of July 5th through 18th. And then the next column is July 12th through 25th. And what we're looking at is how many cases per 10,000 people in those counties are there. And we have to take the highest case count in order to determine the model that we use. And when we look at that, what I want to see is that the case counts week to week are declining or staying steady over the many weeks. And what I notice here is that in 5 of the 7 counties, the case counts have increased. And I didn't have a chance to average the percentages, but they've increased at a rate of somewhere between 10 and 25%. And so we want to see those case counts not increasing at all or decreasing. And only in Carver and Scott counties have they decreased. And in Scott County, it was a negligible decrease. And so especially in our area, we're starting with distance learning so we can really keep our eye on these counts. Now, it's not your job to keep your eye on these counts, but I just want to tell you that every Thursday we get these updates. Every Thursday I hear from the Commissioner of Education or the governor or experts in the field, and they inform me and other school superintendents and charter school leaders about where to be looking. And specifically, we are looking at 7 different counties and possibly adding a couple other counties to this list, and we got to use the least good numbers. So right now, our highest scoring county is Hennepin County at a case count of 23 per 10,000. And what that means is we can be more conservative than the case count, but we can't be less. So we can't go back to school in person unless we get special permission from the Department of Health and the Department of Education and consult with them about why we want to do that. So we're starting in distance learning so we can really learn those mitigation strategies. And then I also just want to really make sure that folks have seen the message that we sent out today, just letting everybody know that we're starting in distance learning. So it's been an hour. I see a couple more questions come in, Holly. I think we could sneak them in this last 60 seconds. Would childcare still be provided on Wednesdays as well? Deb, yes. And that's why we're committing care and supervision 9 to 2 for everybody for sure. And also available 7:30 to 9 and 2 to 5:30 as before and after care that you pay for, or you apply for a sliding scale fee. And that sliding scale really goes to anything you can afford up to the full charge. Oh, and then one last one. Here we go. How much of a decrease in cases to move to hybrid model? So Kia, I'm going to be really specific here, and I'm really glad you asked that question. In the letter today, I said that we'll have to see stable or declining cases in order to move from distance learning to hybrid. And specifically right now, the metrics that I'm using, and so these could change in the future, but specifically right now, I'm looking for all counties to be 20s or below for multiple weeks in a row. So at this point, it would have to be 4 weeks in a row of 20s or below without drastic increase. What we've been seeing in terms of the increases from county to county is that even in a 10% increase every week, we're going to soon be in the 30s and 40s of a case count, and that would actually mean distance learning only. And so in order to move from distance learning to hybrid, we'd have to see case counts in 20s or below. At this point, what I'm saying is for 4 multiple weeks in a row, before we let you know on a 2-week notice that we're ready to move to hybrid because we can mitigate, we're not concerned about the case counts rising, and we think that the testing, the counting, and then the mitigation equipment is available to our staff and our students to make it really safe to come back in hybrid. And then when we do come back in hybrid, you will have at least 2 weeks notice about which group you'll be in. And what I'm working on is making sure that you actually have a notice about what hybrid day you'll be in way before we announce hybrid, so that you would know way ahead of time, you know, both for your elementary student or say for your older teen, what you got to plan for so that they're successful too. So that's a great question, and we might even open up with that one for the next forum. So thank you all so much for coming. Holly, thank you for keeping me on track. Snaps and claps and goodbyes. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.